We are in a season on the Sermon on the Mount. But before I talk anything about that, I want to introduce you to someone, many of you might know him. This here is my dog. This is our dog. This is Jensen. He's 3 years old. And if you come to our house, you wouldn't even know he was there. Everyone, he makes his presence known. That's what the laughter's about. He particularly is a fan of Steph and just melts at her feet. And this is Jensen sat by our back door. He sat on the mat by our back door, and he sat there for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is that just out of shot to his right-hand side is his food bowl. And he is sat anticipating food. Now, the thing you need to know about Jensen is a Labrador. And Labradors are always hungry. So at the time of taking this photo, Jensen has had his breakfast, and it is nowhere near his dinner time, and yet I am probably just, I don't know, opening a packet of cereal or chopping a carrot, and Jensen is thinking, I might get in on this action. And so he comes and he positions himself there on the mat. He is always hungry. The thing about Labradors is they are regarded as one of the best and easiest dogs to train because they will do anything for food. You can get them to do anything for food, apparently. It's not entirely my experience, I'll be honest. But, Jensen, lie down. He lies down and then looks at you, like, where's my food? And you give him some food. And then, get him to sit, there's some food. Get him to stay, there's some food. And he will do, they learn that if they do something, they get rewarded with food. The problem with Labradors is they are always hungry, though, because they have a gene missing. There's a part of their biological makeup that 1 in 4 Labradors have this gene missing. It's called the POMC gene. I don't know what that stands for. But they have this gene missing. And this gene is the gene within them that tells them that they are full. And so they never get that moment of, I'm full. And so they keep coming back, expecting more and more and more, expecting to maybe I'll get to that point where I'm full. He's always hungry. And so one person, they've done multiple studies of this, and one of the people that did a study said this. They said it's a double-edged sword with Labradors. Carrying the variant in the gene may make them more trainable, but it also makes them susceptible to obesity. It is both a hindrance for them, but it is also enables them to be more trained. My question for us today, though, is, are we hungry? Are we hungry? As Ruth said, we've been going through the Sermon on the Mount, and we're in the Beatitudes, and I just want to clarify something, because both the last two people who preached on this made a comment about this. We are not going to go through the entire Sermon on the Mount line by line. Don't panic, we're on verse 6, and there's about 100 verses. I know some of you are thinking this is going to take about 4 years. We're not going to go through it line by line all the way. We will, once we get out of the Beatitudes, look at section by section. But we are going through the Beatitudes one by one, and we're on to the 4th Beatitude today. And what we'll notice when we come to this 4th Beatitude is there is a shift that has taken place. See, the first 3 Beatitudes, blessed are the poor, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek. Those 3 Beatitudes are very much about the place a person finds themselves. But when we move to the 4th Beatitude, we'll notice a shift. Let's read Matthew 5, verses 6 to 8. These are the next 3. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. So we move from that sense of the type of people, the kind of, the places people find themselves in, to this situation where we're looking at what people do, what we go after, what's important to us. We find out that matters. And so in this beatitude we look at today, we are looking at those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. So what is righteousness? If we're going to hunger and thirst for something, we should probably know what it is. So I did what most of us do and looked in the dictionary first of all. And the dictionary defines righteousness as this: the quality of being morally right or justifiable. Someone who has good ethics. Someone who lives a righteous life. And I think that's how most people, if we mention the word righteous, it's not a word that often appears in our vocabulary, is it, on a day-to-day basis? But if we were out talking to people and we mention this word, I think that's what most people would think. The question about this, though, is who defines those morals? Who defines those ethics? We talk, don't we, about people being self-righteous when they have a moral code that maybe makes them feel more superior to us. So is this what the Bible defines as righteousness? Well, the answer to this question, as so often the case, is yes and no. See, although one of the results of righteousness and outworkings of it is to live a certain way, the root of the word righteousness is this: relationship. The root of the word righteousness is relationship. Now, some translations, some of you might have, I think the New Living translates it like this. Some translations will use the word justice. And justice is a part of righteousness, but it is not the whole thing, as we'll see. So righteousness is to be in right relationship. And this is shown throughout Scripture and throughout the Old Testament when we read about God's covenant, God's gracious covenant to his people. We read, for example, in Psalm 71 verse 19, "Your righteousness, God, reaches to the heavens. You who have done great things. Who is like you, God?" Do you see that link? That link between his righteousness and his favor, what he does for his people. Psalm 40 verse 10 says this again: "I do not hide your righteousness in my heart, but I speak of your faithfulness and your saving help." There is something about righteousness. It's about God showing his love, showing his faithfulness to his people, showing that covenant that he established with them through his works, through the way he guides them for years and years and years. And this is the mission of Jesus, to bring us into right relationship with him. At his baptism, he goes to be baptized by John the Baptist, and he says to John the Baptist, "I want to be baptized." And John says, no, I can't baptize you. You need to baptize me. And Jesus replies with this. In Matthew 3 verse 15, he says, "Let it be so now. Let me be baptized now. It is proper for us to do this to fulfill all righteousness." And as we celebrated 2 weeks ago at Easter, Jesus' death and resurrection means that we can be brought into the kingdom. Jesus' mission was to bring us into right relationship with our Father. And he did that on the cross. So the first time we read about righteousness in the Bible, it appears with the story of Abraham, who later became Abraham. Now, Abraham and his wife don't have any children. Abraham is very old, and his wife is also very old, and she is barren, and they have tried for many years to have a family. And God promises Abraham, in this state, he says, "You will have a son, and you will have descendants as numerous as the stars." And it says in Genesis 15:16 that Abraham believed this. He believed in the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteousness. And then this is in the Amplified Version. It defines righteousness as doing right in regard to God and man. So righteousness is not just about saying a prayer to God and then going on with our own lives. Righteousness is shown in our lives on a daily basis. As we live by faith each day, seeking God's will, pursuing his kingdom, that is where we find righteousness. And this is what the covenant law in the Old Testament is all about. You know, you can go through and you can read Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and you can read through the covenant law, and sometimes it's complicated to work out what has this got to do with anything. Some of the laws in there are weird, aren't they? Let's be honest. But fundamentally, the purpose of the covenant was this. It was calling the people of Israel, calling them to live differently to those nations around, to live in that right relationship with God, to live by faith in how they worship God and how they related to God through worship, through sacrifice. And it was also about how they related to each other, how they treated each other fairly, how they looked after the widows and the orphans. There's lines in there about justice, how you deal with people that do wrong to each other. And there's lines about cities of refuge, where God says, you know, I want you to create spaces for people to live and to be safe. That's what the law is all about. It's all about God establishing right relationship between, first of all, between him and his people, and then amongst his people. Psalm 11 verse 7 says this: "For the Lord is righteous. He loves justice, and the upright will see his face." Note that the relationship between righteousness and justice. If you treat someone right, it's just. That's what justice is. It's people being treated fairly. And those who seek righteousness are those who seek right relationships everywhere. But I do just want to give a little note on this, because right relationships should not be confused with equality. You know, there's a lot of stuff in the world at the moment about equality, isn't there? But right relationships doesn't always mean that everyone is equal, but it means there's a right relationship between them. Let me give you a couple of examples. A father and a son. I have a 6-year-old son. We have a relationship. And there is a right way for us to have a relationship. Love, care, me looking after him, me nurturing him, me teaching him, me supporting him, him showing respect to me. But the role of the father is very different to the role of the son. We're not equals. Here's another example to maybe put it into our world's terms. The CEO of a major corporation who makes all the big decisions doesn't earn the same as someone who is on the manufacturing line. And there's a reason for that. We recognize that there is a reason for that. The responsibility of those people is completely different. But the right relationship, which sadly we don't see in our world very often, is that the CEO and the company, first of all, they pay their taxes. Just throw that in. But secondly, they look after the workers. They respect the workers. They ensure the workers are paid fairly. That's the right relationship. And I'm sure you can think of other examples. So righteousness is everything in its right place, relating to each other in a right way. And this shouldn't be confused, going after righteousness shouldn't be confused either with the concept of salvation through works. We don't believe in salvation through works. We believe in salvation by grace alone. Jesus died on the cross once and for all of us. And it is by his sacrifice alone that we are saved. But going after righteousness is seeing God's kingdom come in our lives and the lives of those around us. Okay, so now we've kind of established what righteousness is. Let's talk about hungering and thirsting. So Jesus said, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Hungering and thirst is a bit of an interesting one for us as people who live in the West, in the UK, in 2024, I can't even remember what year it was then. You know, we kind of get it, don't we? You know, but let's be honest. For most of us, we don't experience extreme hunger. My kids might think they do. But most of us don't experience extreme hunger. But for those who Jesus is talking to in this moment on that mountainside, those people living in the Middle East at that time, hunger and thirst is a very real threat. It is at the forefront of their minds. Will those crops that we planted yield? Will we be able to eat? Will the rains come at the right time? Will the wells dry up? It's a very real thing in their minds, and it dominates their thinking. And sadly, we have to acknowledge that in our world today, there are people for whom this is their daily reality. And we, as a church, we support a couple of organisations who work in places to help people for who hunger and thirst is a real threat. As I was preparing this, I read a story about a man. He went on a trek through the Sahara Desert. Now, that doesn't sound like much fun to me, but he went on a trek on a guided trek, and they were 2 or 3 days into this trek, and they were on the way to this well that apparently had been there since ancient times. Thousands of years this well had been there and had water flowing, and they were on their way there. And it was about a 4-day trek, and they're kind of 2 days in, and they suddenly realize that the container that they were carrying the water in had been leaking, and they had run out of water. And they are in the middle of the Sahara Desert, and it's too late to go back, because it will actually take them more time to go back than it will to go to the well. And so they have to make a decision. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep going. We're going to get to the well. And they went a whole day without water in the desert. And as they're walking, they're starting to dehydrate. They're hallucinating. And the guy said his throat got so dry that they had food with them, but he couldn't eat the food because his throat was like sandpaper. And he said suddenly, all he could think about was how thirsty he was. All he could think about was quenching his thirst. All he could think about was that well. And he said when the well came into sight, he got there and he just lapped it up. And he said this verse came to his mind, because he said, I realized that I have never thirsted for righteousness in the way that I thirsted in that moment. It had never dominated his thinking the same way that thirsting after the water had. Does a pursuit of righteousness dominate our thinking in the same way? I suspect for most of us, the answer is probably no. And I'm speaking to myself here, firstly. So why is this? Well, could it be that we have allowed ourselves to become satisfied in lesser things? If you fill your natural body with Big Macs and pizza, you will feel temporarily full, but you will not be satisfied. Some of you might remember this guy. This was a film in 2004, for those of you who don't know this. This man, his name's Morgan Spurlock, what a great name. He ate McDonald's only for 30 days. It's the only thing he ate. And it's called Super Size Me because at that point McDonald's were doing their super size. So you get small, medium, large, and then super size. And he would eat, it was the only thing he'd eat. Breakfast McDonald's, lunch McDonald's, dinner McDonald's. And he became full because he was full of McDonald's. But let me tell you the other outcomes there were. He had, unsurprisingly, by the way, increased weight, increased cholesterol. He had fat accumulation on bits of his body where you don't want fat accumulation. His liver, for example. Sexual dysfunction and mood swings. His mental health just obliterated. And it continued for decades. He was not satisfied. Quite the opposite. And yet so many of us live our lives like this, don't we? We fill ourselves with those short-term wins. We think, oh, if I could just get this bit of success, if I could just get this new job, if I could just get this new relationship. Or maybe we think, I need to have that drink, or I need to have that moment with that person, or I just need to sit on my phone for an hour because that's the most satisfying thing in the world. And we go after these short-term hits, don't we? We go after these things that satisfy us for a short term. And we always discover that it doesn't satisfy us. And yet for some reason, and maybe it's just me, but we fall into this trap again and again and again. And I wonder why. I wonder why. And I ponder it's because of this. Being hungry costs. Being hungry costs us. It takes our energy. It affects our mood. How many of you get hangry? I get hangry. I saw this as I was preparing for this and I couldn't resist this. This is on a bench and it says, for Barbara, who was awful when hungry, but otherwise pretty solid. And I thought, how many people do you know like that? That they're really nice people, but the minute they've not eaten, they're awful. Pretty solid. You know, there's many studies that have been done on what produces hunger in an appetite in the human body. And when your body, when you eat a meal, what happens is about 2 hours after you've eaten, your stomach is empty. And your body starts to release this hormone, I think it's called ghrelin, something like that. And this triggers the body to start feeling hungry. This is what provokes your hunger pains. This provokes your brain to think, I need to find food. But studies have shown, as they've looked more and more into hunger and into appetite, that the brain can have an effect on this. For example, and this is all proven scientifically, if you think you have had a big breakfast, you are less likely to be hungry at lunch. Even though your stomach empties and the hormone was released, your brain goes, I had a big breakfast, I'm okay. However, if your stomach is full and your brain sees something that it regards as a treat, potentially high in energy, then it is likely to tell you that you're hungry even if you're not. This is where the pudding stomach comes in. Equally, if you are busy or distracted, then you can put off hunger. How many of you have got to kind of 1:30, 2 o'clock and I haven't had lunch yet, I'm really hungry because you've been busy. And sadly, this is how eating disorders take root, because people's brains come out of tune with what the body's doing and they say, I'm not hungry, I don't need food. The point is this, though. Hunger is not based simply on a fact of how much nutrition you've had. You can condition yourself for hunger and to be hungry for the good things. So how do we do this? Well, it's not just enough to hope, sadly. And it's not just enough to throw a quick prayer up. Homer Simpson gives us this example. Dear Lord, please let me only crave lettuce this week. How many of you know that that's not going to work and he'll be in the power station very soon and eating a donut? We try that, don't we? We say, oh God, I've really struggled with this thing. Could you just fix it? Thanks. Amen. But there's something about us partnering with God. We have to make decisions. What will I feed myself with? We have to ensure we're filling ourselves with the right stuff, with his word, with his righteousness, with his faithfulness. And sometimes, in order to create hunger, we have to decide we're going to go without something. Fasting is an excellent way to generate hunger for God. If you take time out to fast, mainly from food, but also from other things that are causing distractions, you will find yourself growing in hunger for God. You'll also find yourself growing in hunger for food, by the way. Being real. When you fast, you get hungry for the natural, but you also get hungry for the things of God. God responds to hunger. They will be filled. Or other translations say they will be satisfied. Not for a moment, not for a quick fix, but for eternity. You will be filled. And God doesn't need you to be perfect. I want you to notice this. It doesn't say, blessed are the righteous. It says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. He's not looking for you to be perfect. He's not looking for you to just follow a set of rules. He's looking for you to be hungry, to pursue him, to pursue his righteousness, to go after that right relationship with him in everything you do, and to seek that right relationship with those around you in every area of society. To see the poor, the marginalized, the sick, the widowed looked after. To see those people in places of power and wealth, which sometimes is us, distributing that wealth fairly. Isaiah 58, this is in the Message from verse 6, says, this is the kind of fast day I'm after. To break the chains of injustice, to get rid of exploitation in the workplace, to free the oppressed, cancel debts. What I'm interested in seeing you do is sharing your food with the hungry, inviting the homeless poor into your homes, putting clothes on the shivering ill-clad, being available to your own families. Do this and the lights will turn on, and your lives will turn around at once. Your righteousness will pave your way. The God of glory will secure your passage. Then, when you pray, God will answer. You'll call out for help, and I'll say, here I am. We are in a critical moment for the church globally. Statistics say the church in the West is in decline. And the New York pastor John Tyson, who I've quoted before, recently said this. He said, we have two choices. We can either manage the decline. We can turn up, we can have our nice times together, and then we can leave. And we can just enjoy that time, and we can just manage the decline. Or we can ask God to do something about it. we can ask God to move. God has put us on this earth for this moment. He is looking for a hungry people. A hungry people who want to see all things restored to their rightful place in relationship with God and each other. That sounds like revival to me. The question is, how hungry are we? Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. Revelation 21, Sarah read this last week, or some of this last week. 21 verse 5 and 6 says, "And he who was seated," that's Jesus, "on the throne said, 'Behold, I am making all things new.'" This is our hope. Also, he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. And he said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty, I will give from the spring of the water of life without payment." He will give to the thirsty from the spring of life. He will quench our thirst. As I was preparing this, I was out walking and I felt God say that we are going to be entering a season of dissatisfaction, which is not what you want to be God's tell you as a leader. But I don't mean a dissatisfaction with each other. I don't mean a dissatisfaction with the music or dissatisfaction with the teaching or the way the chairs are out. They're excellent, Barry. What I mean is a dissatisfaction with where we find ourselves in this time. We're going to find ourselves in worship and thinking, I want to go deep. I'm not satisfied with where we are. We need to go further. We need to go deeper into his presence. We need to experience more of his love, more of his hope, more of his joy. We need to be humbled in his presence. We need to go deeper in it. We're going to come to the end of our times of worship and feel like, I need more. And that's okay, because there's always another time. We're going to find that we are moved by situations around us, maybe in our workplaces, maybe as we're walking down the street, maybe as we look at the news, when we see the injustice and the pain. God is going to move our hearts, and we're going to be moved to action. And our expectations are going to be raised because we realize that nothing but praying to God and giving these things to God will do. Because God, we need you. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. Marcus, do you guys want to come back up? So come. We're going to go back into a time of worship. And as we do that, I just invite you to respond in whatever way you feel. But I felt there were kind of three groups of people that God was particularly highlighting to me as I prepared this. The first is there may be people in the room that don't know Jesus. And you have been chasing after trying to be satisfied. You're trying to find something that will quench your thirst. And you've tried lots of things, and Jesus is saying, I'm the only one that will satisfy you. I am the only one. I want to bring you into that right relationship with your Father. I will satisfy you. And so if that's you, I'd love to talk to you, to pray with you. Maybe you're just interested. Maybe you're not even at that point yet, but you just think, something in me is just burning slightly. Maybe your heart's beating fast. I don't know. But you just feel, I need to find out more. Then I'll be down here, and there'll be some of the prayer team as well. We'll be here. We'd love to speak to you more about that. And then I sensed there were those who maybe just have not felt very hungry. And you're realizing that you've been satisfying yourself with other things. Maybe a career, maybe relationships, whatever it is, other things that you filled your time, you filled your energy trying to satisfy your hunger. And you're actually realizing today, God, I need to come back. I need you. I want to be hungry for you. And then there's those who are hungry already. And maybe you've been hungry for decades. And I just felt God say, keep going. Keep being hungry. Charlie and Pamela, I saw you guys, and I just felt God say, keep going. Keep being hungry. Decades and decades of being hungry for God's presence. Keep going. He will satisfy you. So we're going to worship and praise God together. And if any of those resonate with you, then I just invite you to respond however you want to this morning. Maybe you need to come out from your seat. Maybe there's some space down the front and you feel I just need to come down and kneel or stand before God. Maybe you'd like someone to pray with you. There's going to be a prayer team over in the prayer space at the end of the meeting. But come, all who are hungry, all who are thirsty for righteousness, and you will be filled.